Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something that feels, well, incredibly familiar. Something we think about constantly, maybe dream of, and we use the word for it every single day, friendship.
Right.
But maybe, just maybe, we don't always deeply understand what it actually is or, what it really asks of us.
It's funny, isn't it? It's one of the most fundamental human connections.
Absolutely.
And yet, as these sources we're looking at reveal its true nature, its demands, its profound importance, well, they're often far richer and more complex than we might imagine day to day.
Totally agree. And to help us unpack all this, we've got a really fascinating stack of source material here.
Yeah, it's quite a collection.
It's writings on friendship from just a huge array of brilliant thinkers across different times. We've got ancient philosophers like Aristotle.
Classic starting point.
Right. Then Renaissance voices like Montaigne and Bacon. And stretching through to more modern perspectives, people like Emerson and Thoreau.
And it's compiled. I think you can find it in a book called The Gift of Friendship. It gives us this incredible, multi-century conversation happening on this one single topic.
Exactly. So our mission, really, for this deep dive is to go through this collection, try to extract the most important insights.
Pull out those surprising nuggets.
Yeah, the surprising bits, and give you, the listener, a real shortcut to being, well, better informed on this absolutely essential human bond.
We're going to explore the really high ideals they lay out.
Some lofty stuff.
Oh, yeah. But also the messy realities they don't shy away from, the practicalities, and even some, inherent paradoxes in friendship.
So it's a journey into what friendship is, why these great minds believed it mattered so much, and just how difficult
And how rewarding.
and ultimately how rewarding it can truly be.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
That's good.
Where better to start than, well, the beginning?
Wow.
Why is friendship seen as just so essential to being human?
Well, Aristotle, right off the bat, he frames it really powerfully. He sees it as either a virtue in itself or something so closely connected to virtue, it's almost inseparable.
And he doesn't stop there, does he? He calls it most necessary for life.
Most necessary.
He argues that even happy people who seemingly have everything, they still need friends because, that classic line.
Man is a social animal.
Exactly. And formed by nature for living with others. You just aren't built to go it alone and truly thrive.
And the impact it has. It's described in almost spiritual terms sometimes. Emerson talks about the sheer joy it brings.
Right.
He calls friendship an element of love like a fine ether, causing a cordial exhilaration.
Wow. Cordial exhilaration.
Yeah. He says these connections literally make the sweetness of life. It's not just, oh, that's nice to have. It's fundamental to the whole flavor of living.
And building on that, Emerson also notes how friendship seems to almost supercharge our capabilities. He suggests our intellectual and active powers increase with our affection, which, when you think about it...
That feels true, doesn't it?
It does. Think about trying to think something through alone for hours versus the clarity you get just talking it out with a close friend for 10 minutes.
Totally. He uses this example, I think, of a scholar struggling for a single thought in meditation.
Yeah.
But then he writes a letter to a friend, and suddenly troops of gentle thoughts just unlock.
That really mirrors Bacon's point beautifully, doesn't it?
It does. Bacon says friendship clarifies thought, sharpens the understanding.
He has that great analogy.
Oh, the tapestry one. Yeah, conversation with a friend is like cloth of Arras opened and put abroad, so you see the imagery clearly.
Right, whereas just thinking by yourself is like the cloth all folded up. You can't really see the pattern.
Exactly. And he says discourse with a friend can make a man wiser than himself, wiser than he could be just by meditation alone. It's like they help you see your own thoughts more clearly.
That is such a profound idea, the friend, as a necessary aid to clear thinking. And Bacon, of course, gives us that line everyone knows, redoubleth joys and cutteth griefs in halves. But he puts it in this bigger context, doesn't he? The alchemist's stone, but for the mind.
Or like union in nature, how it strengthens good things and dulls the impact of, harsh things.
And then there's this incredibly moving declaration from someone named Enthusa, who's kind of buried in this collection.
Oh, yeah, that one's powerful.
She elevates friendship to something, well, almost irreplaceable. She says a truly faithful friend is the medicine of life.
The medicine of life.
And a strong covering, incomparable to any treasure, and get this, even sweeter than the present life.
Sweeter than being alive. I mean, just pause on that for a second.
Right. Sweeter than life itself. That really speaks volumes about the depth of meaning these relationships can hold.
He really does. And Emerson echoes this too. He says, friends, carry out the world for me to new and noble depths.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's not just support, like helping you move. It's about mutual revelation, expanding each other's whole understanding of existence.
Okay, so it's crystal clear. These thinkers see friendship as way, way more than just casual acquaintance or, pleasant company.
Definitely.
But that raises a critical question, doesn't it? What exactly constitutes this core of true friendship they're talking about? How do we distinguish it from, well, all the other surface level connections we have?
Right, because let's be honest, not every relationship you call friend would qualify under these pretty demanding definitions.
They're not even close, probably.
Oh, wait.
Aristotle's maybe the most clinical here. He identifies 3 motives, right?
Yeah, 3. Utility, pleasure, and goodness.
Utility, pleasure, goodness. Yep.
And he's completely unambiguous about it. Only the friendship based on goodness, where people wish good to their friends for their own sakes.
Not for what they get out of it.
Exactly. Not for what they can get. Not just for the fun they have. That is what he deems perfect and permanent. And his reasoning is simple. Goodness itself is stable. It endures.
Whereas the other 2?
Utility and pleasure, they're inherently temporary. Aristotle points out they just dissolve when the circumstances change.
When the person isn't useful anymore.
Or isn't fun to be around anymore. The basis for the connection is gone.
There's that account from Henry Mackenzie in the collection. It provides a pretty stark, almost cynical example of this, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Mackenzie, he describes friendships just dissolving or becoming these costly burdens instead of benefits.
To the point where he basically throws his hands up.
Right. He resolves in this moment of kind of bitter reflection to be no one's friend but my own, which is maybe the logical, if pretty sad, endpoint if you only prioritize utility.
Wow. Okay, so pushing even beyond just utility and pleasure, Thoreau has this really elevated view.
Yeah, Thoreau takes it up a level.
He says friends should be spiritual ministers to each other's spirits.
Spiritual ministers, not just practical helpers.
Right. It's not about helping you move house or having drinks. It's about ministering to your inner self, your spirit. He even says friends live in melody, not merely harmony.
Melody, not just harmony. What do you think he means by that?
Well, harmony is just agreement, right? Pleasant chords. Melody implies something more. Maybe a complex line, maybe something with tension and resolution. A deeper, more dynamic resonance, perhaps. Not just simple agreement.
That's interesting. And then Montaigne. Well, Montaigne takes this spiritual element to its absolute peak.
He really goes for it.
He describes true friendship as a complete union of wills. A spiritual bond where minds actually intermix and confound themselves one in the other.
He uses that ancient image, doesn't he? 1 soul and 2 bodies.
Exactly. And he contrasts this fiercely with all other relationships, marriage, family ties, everything else.
Why? What's the difference for him?
Because those other relationships, he argues, have external constraints,
Right.
duties, specific purposes. Marriage has legal and social structures. Family has biological ties and obligations.
Oh.
True friendship, for Montaigne, is chosen purely for its own sake. It's this complete voluntary fusion.
That idea of fusion is incredibly powerful. Goldsmith adds another angle, too, suggesting friendship is like a debt of honor.
A debt of honor. How so?
Well, his point is that the very moment you start talking about it as an obligation, or you start calculating what's owed, who did what for whom.
It loses something.
Exactly. It loses its true free nature. He uses that story, Plotinus and Musidorus.
Right, where one guy showers benefits on the other.
Yeah, Plotinus does, but Musidorus can't give his heart fully because the whole exchange feels like a transaction, a calculation. It prevents that genuine exchange of hearts.
So it has to be a gift, freely given, not transactional.
Absolutely. And then Emerson comes in and just hits you with the sheer demand of this kind of bond.
Yeah, Emerson doesn't pull punches.
He says it requires the roughest courage, that it's the solidest thing we know, found not in some easy sentiment, but in the tough fiber of the human heart.
Not the cobweb of wine and dreams, as he puts it.
Right. It's not about snatching some sudden sweetness. He calls it the slowest fruit, something that takes many summers and many winters to ripen. It's built through time, through resilience, through toughness.
Wow. Okay. So these are incredibly high standards being set here.
Seriously high. Perfect goodness, spiritual ministry, total union of wills, roughest courage.
Yeah, I mean, when you hear that kind of language, it naturally leads us to the next point, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
difficulties, the challenges involved in actually achieving and maintaining these kinds of deep bonds in the real world.
Exactly. Because hearing those ideals, you just know it's not going to be easy.
And Thoreau is incredibly honest about this. He calls the drama of friendship always a tragedy.
Always a tragedy. That's pretty bleak.
It sounds bleak, but maybe he means it's constantly falling short, enacted daily. He admits flat out it's simply impossible to make friends answer to our ideal. The ideal is one thing, reality. Well, it's messier.
He also describes it as a delicate plant, right?
Yeah, a delicate plant, and says it requires constant proof, almost like a miracle.
That language really underscores just how fragile it can feel, how demanding it is to sustain this kind of connection against, the friction of daily life and just basic human imperfection.
Mm-hmm. And Samuel Johnson, he gets really specific about the ways friendship can be destroyed.
What does he list?
Well, time changes people, obviously. Interests inevitably start to oppose each other. Disputes arise, sometimes even from just, harmless jokes that land wrong.
Oh, yeah, that happens.
But he reserves particular focus for the danger around giving and receiving advice.
Ah, yes.
The advice trap.
Totally. He observes it's often met with resentment, especially when the person getting the advice is already feeling guilty about whatever fault is being pointed out. It's a painful but, God, depressingly common way bonds just fray.
That insight about advice really connects with Emerson's point about the perpetual disappointment of actual society.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, Emerson says even when you're among genuinely virtuous and gifted people, the interactions can still be marred by these sudden, unseasonable apathies.
Apathies, like people just check out. Sort of. Or their faculties just aren't playing true. People aren't consistently able to meet you at that high level, even when maybe they want to. We disappoint each other sometimes.
That feels very real. And it leads to another point these authors widely agree on. True friendship, as they define it, is rare.
Really rare.
And hard to find. Johnson suggests very few people are truly qualified for it.
Montaigne says it's seldom seen and rarely found.
Right, requiring inner selves that are sincerely wrought, perfectly true. I mean, who meets that standard?
Thoreau, too, speaks of the difficulty in finding that one person among thousands who could really be that kind of friend.
So even beyond finding the right person, there are these profound communication challenges, too.
Like what?
Thoreau points out that words themselves can feel puny or just inadequate to express the real depth of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, even worse, he says, silence is not understood, which he calls a tragedy. The connection is so delicate, even the absence of words can be misinterpreted and cause damage.
Wow. And Addison highlights something related, doesn't he? About group dynamics.
Yeah, Addison points out that the deepest, most unreserved talk, the kind that really clarifies thought, like Bacon talked about, that usually only happens between two close friends.
Right. Conversation in larger groups, while it can be fun and social, tends to be more general, maybe more guarded.
Exactly. It requires this specific, intimate, vulnerable space that's just hard to create consistently, especially with more people involved.
Okay, so we've got this picture emerging of an essential, incredibly profound bond.
Hugely valuable.
But one that's also incredibly difficult, demanding, and frankly, quite rare.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty well.
Which leads us into some really fascinating paradoxes and maybe surprising requirements that these thinkers identify for this high form of friendship.
Right, some counterintuitive stuff comes up here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most striking is from Emerson.
What's that?
He suggests that true friendship actually requires the ability to do without it.
Wait, to have it, you need to be able to not have it. That sounds paradoxical.
It does. But I don't think he's advocating isolation. It seems to be more about a kind of self-reliance, a needing to stand on your own 2 feet first.
Ah, okay. Like, you have to be whole and complete in yourself before you can truly meet another person on equal terms for this kind of profound union.
Exactly. You can't be looking to the friendship to complete you, in a way.
He also says something that sounds quite harsh initially. Treat your friend as a spectacle.
Yeah, and revere their superiorities. Even see them as a beautiful enemy, untamable.
A beautiful enemy. That sounds challenging.
It does sound challenging, but I think it means respecting their distinctness, their independence, maybe even their wildness.
So not trying to possess them or control them.
Right. Not reducing them to just a comfort blanket for yourself, but admiring them for exactly who they are, even the parts that might challenge you or that you can't tame.
That makes more sense. It definitely touches on that necessary balance between likeness and unlikeness then.
Absolutely. Emerson talks about needing both power and consent in the other person. He rejects concession, rejects the friend, just being an echo of yourself.
So true friendship needs two distinct, strong individuals meeting as equals.
Precisely. Which brings up another big question these guys tackle. Numbers.
Right. How many true friends can you actually have, according to them?
Well, Aristotle, Addison, Montaigne, they all seem to agree. Not many. Not of this truly deep kind.
Aristotle notes that the famous friendships from history are typically between just two people.
Yeah. And Addison quotes, I think it's Ecclesiasticus, saying you might have many well-wishers but few friends, perhaps,
Yeah.
but one counselor of the thousand.
1 in 1,000. And Montaigne is the most emphatic, isn't he?
Absolutely. He argues his definition of perfect friendship, that total union of wills, one soul and two bodies, makes it logically impossible to double or share widely.
Why impossible?
Because the merging of souls is so complete, so total, it requires a kind of exclusivity for him. You can't give your whole self over completely to more than one person that way.
Okay, that's a strong stance. But Enthusa, she offers a slightly different, more hopeful perspective on unity, right?
Yeah, Anthusa's angle is beautiful. She suggests that in unity, like the unity found among friends, one person can become equivalent to many. They can be multiplied 1,000-fold.
So it's not about the number of individual deep bonds.
Not necessarily. It's more about the power and protection found within a unified connection, or maybe even a close group. Each person feels the strength and care of the collective, making them feel, mightier and more protected than they would be alone.
That's a nice way to think about it. It highlights that while those incredibly intense individual bonds might be limited, the spirit or the effect of friendship, that sense of unity and care, can really multiply the strength of everyone involved.
Definitely. And we also keep circling back forcefully to the importance of virtue and equality.
Yeah, those themes are constant. Johnson states pretty bluntly that friendship is seldom lasting but between equals.
Or, he adds, where any superiority on one side is balanced by some other advantage on the other side.
Thoreau similarly emphasizes perfect equality.
And Aristotle, right back at the start, basically asserts that the good alone can be friends.
Wow, so these aren't bonds for the unequal or the calculating or the vicious. They seem to require a certain moral and personal stature from both people.
It seems so. And finally, Bacon describes a third, very practical fruit of friendship.
Okay, what's that?
Aid. Basically, help in exercising the offices of life. He suggests a friend can act almost like a deputy for you.
A deputy? Like how?
Enabling you to say or do things gracefully that you couldn't really do yourself. Like having a friend speak about your merits or ask for something on your behalf, things that might seem awkward or boastful coming from you directly.
Ah, okay. So your friend allows you to navigate the social and practical world more effectively because they can act for you, almost like an extension of yourself.
Exactly. It's a very practical benefit he highlights.
Okay. So we've journeyed from why friendship is essential to its core definition through all the significant difficulties.
And there are many.
And now these striking requirements and paradoxes. When you look at all of that together, you really start to understand the immense value these thinkers place on it.
Absolutely. But also the significant personal cost that can be involved.
That's a key point. Montaigne's account of losing his friend La Boétie, it's just heartbreaking.
Oh, it really is. It speaks directly to this cost. He says since his friend died, he has only languished. He feels but half myself.
But half myself. It wasn't just losing company, was it? It was like losing a part of his actual being because their souls were supposedly so intertwined.
That's exactly how he presents it. And that resonates so strongly with Anthusa's point we touched on earlier.
The one about poverty.
Yeah. With a friend, even poverty is bearable, but without him, health and wealth are unbearable.
It completely reframes what true richness actually is, doesn't it? Health, money. They mean very little if you lack that fundamental human connection at its deepest level.
These personal accounts, they just underscore how high the stakes really are, how deeply friendship can become integrated into your identity, your well-being, your whole ability to navigate the world.
And it brings us, I think, to Emerson's crucial line that sort of sets the ultimate standard here.
Which one is that?
He says, quite simply, the only way to have a friend is to be one.
Oh, simple, but profound.
Right. It's not just a nice saying. It implies that actually achieving this kind of bond requires profound personal character, growth, integrity, on your part.
You have to embody the very qualities you're seeking in a friend.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that the challenge of friendship isn't solely about finding that perfect other person out there.
Though that's hard enough.
Right. It's also, maybe even primarily, about cultivating the capacity within yourself to meet these incredibly high ideals. The goodness, the equality, the courage, the willingness to be vulnerable, to accept difference.
To be the kind of person capable of that union of wills or that spiritual ministry.
Yeah. Think about that anecdote Montaigne quotes about the young soldier who valued a true friend more than an entire kingdom.
Right. It highlights how, for those who really understood it, this connection wasn't just important. It was literally the highest possible treasure, worth more than all the power or wealth in the world.
So these thinkers, looking back across all these centuries, they consistently describe friendship not as some casual convenience or just another relationship.
No, definitely no.
But as this profound, often very challenging, almost spiritual union, one that requires deep personal integrity and real vulnerability from everyone involved.
It really puts our everyday use of the word friend into perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. So reflecting on this whole deep dive into these classic texts, it seems clear that while the word friendship is common, the experience of this kind of true, deep friendship they describe, well, it's presented as rare, immensely valuable.
And maybe the most significant relationship one can possibly cultivate in life.
Absolutely. And it leaves us, I think, with a powerful, maybe provocative thought to consider, drawing on all these difficult requirements and the acknowledged rarity.
What's that?
Well, if true friendship really requires such equality, such virtue, such willingness to be vulnerable, even that capacity Emerson talks about, to see your friend as a kind of beautiful enemy, does its rarity reflect more on the difficulty of finding other people who meet this incredibly high standard?
Or does it reflect more, perhaps on our own capacity, yours and mine, the listeners, our own capacity to truly be such a friend?